record this. Let's jump right in. Yes.
Regarding the reading assignments, I'm having a hard time reading because it's sideways.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. You have to lie down so that you can read.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Brother Alex. Brother Alex.
Yes, Pastor. Yes, Pastor.
You just have to adjust the Millennium Falcon.
I'll be flying sideways.
Yeah, I think if you have a lock screen feature, you'll need to just lock your screen and then rotate it. So, yeah, I apologize for the inconvenience there on that.
But I don't think that's practical for a laptop.
But then the laptop won't rotate, right? So you'll be
Yes, that's not.
You can just rotate
Yes.
the laptop then.
But in the PDF already, you can do that. Yeah, in PDF you can do that.
Yeah, PDF you can rotate it. That's right. So, yeah, I think there's a feature right on the Acrobat Reader that lets you do that.
Okay.
I have to, challenge you a little bit, so you're not bored. So I have to give you some fun activity there. So yeah, let's get right to the notes here on prepositions, and then we'll cover the assignment details a little bit later. All right. So we are, of course, this is some of the same diagrams I've been showing you that our focus has been on the connector words for quite some time now. And we spent time on the conjunctions. And then last week we dove into the prepositions. And again, just think of a preposition again as another linking word, another connecting word. And the prepositional phrases are primarily those which link a preposition and a noun and link that to some other word in the sentence that they modify. All right, and last week we looked at quite a few just regular basic examples. This week what I want to do is actually have us take a look at a passage together and just identify the prepositions in that passage and then how they're functioning in the passage. So we're going to do the same thing we did last week, except we'll be looking in scripture this time to get our examples. All right, and let me just remind you of the process here for identifying prepositional phrase and what that phrase is modifying. Again, I encouraged you to memorize 9 prepositions: at, with, in, from, for, by, of, on, and to. Those are a with boot, and I think those are the 9 most common. And so if you can memorize those, that'll help speed up the process for you a little bit in identifying the prepositions. And then so basically what you're going to do is, if you think you have a word that is a preposition, the first step is simply to confirm that you have a preposition. And the way you do that is just look at what follows it. If it's a noun, then you have a preposition. Now again, you have to keep in mind, don't just look at the word right after, just look until the next connecting word. All right? Because the connecting words not only join the phrases and clauses, but they also identify those phrases and clauses. I've used the analogy of mortar and bricks, right? And if you think of the brick as being the phrase or the clause, the mortar is what separates the bricks, but also it joins them together. And so we'll go through some examples and we'll show you that. But first, we want to verify we actually have a preposition. And I say that because there are words such as the word for, right, which we already looked at in quite a few examples before, that can function as a conjunction, right? We saw many examples of that before. But this word for is also, can also be a preposition. It's one of those quirky words, odd words in English language that can act in 2 different ways, all right? There's a few of those words. The word to is another one that can act differently. It can be a preposition, or it can be what's called an infinitive. That's another type of verbal that we might get to down the road here. So first, though, we want to confirm, do we have a noun that is following the preposition? And then the second thing we want to look at is, if we confirm that, then we say, okay, what comes before? I should have worded it that way. It comes before the preposition. Okay? That is the word that the preposition usually modifies, all right? We've called that the rule of proximity. So the word that the preposition follows is usually the word it is modifying, but not always, all right? And the way we check that is, once we identify that word that comes before the preposition, we then ask, okay, does it make sense? Could that prepositional phrase modify that word? Is there a way that that would make sense? All right, and that's what we look at in the context to see if that would make sense. And then finally, we answer the question, if it does make sense, then in what way does it modify that particular word? All right. Okay, so if you remember last week, we just took a number of examples and we ran them through these 4 steps to see, to identify not only the prepositions, but then also how they were modifying, what word they were modifying in the sentence. So let's do that with this passage, Ephesians 3:14 through 19. We want to identify the prepositions that exist in this passage, and then we'll go through those 4 steps together, okay? So let's first, we'll start with, let's see, Pastor Noor, since you're on the top of my screen. Just verse 14, tell me if you see any prepositions here. Which words do you think might be prepositions? Just verse 14. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, word for.
Okay, for. Any others
Yeah.
that might be?
No.
Okay, for this reason, be on my knees. How about, I think I see one other one that could be.
For this reason, I bow my knees before.
There you go. Okay. All right, and we'll check that in a minute and see. I'll come back to you. We'll check that to see if it passes those 4 tests that I just mentioned. But let's go to verse 15. I'll ask Brother Alex to do that. Can you identify any prepositions in verse 15, Alex?
From,
Okay.
from, and,
All right.
and.
Okay. And now remember that one, if we memorized, there's 2 things I've asked you to memorize. And boy is one. That's and, nor, but, or, and yet. And remember, those are coordinating conjunctions. So is this word and a conjunction or preposition?
Conjunction.
Yeah, so that's not a preposition, right? Because and is part of and boy.
Okay.
Okay.
How about on?
On, okay. Now let's remember too, I told you about a with boot, right? So if you memorize these, notice the word on is in there. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, on, and then also notice in is one of the ones you found.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. Pastor Bobby, I'm going to give you verse 16.
Verse 16, yes. There are a lot here, okay? I'm sorry, he. To.
Which one? This one?
Of, yes. To, of, To again with in again dwell in your heart.
Oh, just verse 16. We're gonna.
Ah, that's verse 16. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So how about true, Pastor Tim? No.
Okay. Well, we'll check it. We'll go through the 4 steps.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
True. Okay. With power, true. So
All right. I
yeah.
think that's a. We'll do our test on that in a minute. So I'll come back to you when we go through those in detail. Pastor Allen, I'll give you verse 17. Just identify what you think are the prepositions.
Okay. Okay, wait. Okay. Verse 17. In,
Okay.
in.
This one here, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think true is like maybe.
This
True.
one. That
Yeah.
one there. Okay.
That one.
All right. Okay. Good. Don't think I see any others. Let's go to Sir Sid in verse 18.
Verse 18, preposition with.
With. Okay.
That's the only.
All right. So you can do verse 19 too. I don't want you to get off that easy. So you see any more in verse 19?
Of.
There's another one in
Of.
verse 18.
Okay. What else is in verse 18?
Two.
What else? What?
Okay. All right. He
Remember
says,
that to, it's followed by a verb, comprehend.
yeah, we'll talk about that. For now, we'll leave it. We'll test it. All right. So verse 19, you've got of. Any more?
Another two.
All right.
After up. And then of God.
Of. Good. Okay.
19, two. To know and to know also.
Okay. So
That's
we'll try-
followed by a verb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll check that out in a minute. All right. So let's just start testing these. All right. So I just I highlighted the ones you guys identified. So let's go through the process here and ask ourselves these steps. So we'll start with, I think, was it, who did verse 14? Was that you, Pastor Noor?
Sir Nur.
Okay, Pastor Noor. So we'll come back to you and then ask ourselves, okay, you had the word for. Now, we're going to do the test. Is it followed by a noun? Now, what that means is the words that come after the preposition until we reach the next connector word, okay? And the next connector word you identified is before. So we're looking at this particular, we're looking at this set of words here, all right? We don't see any other connector word. We don't see any, or any punctuation, all right? So is this thing that I highlighted in gray, that is what follows the word for. Is that a noun or is it a clause?
It's a clause.
It's a clause, right? You see the verb here, I, and the subject, the verb bow, and the subject I. So if it is a clause, then it cannot be a preposition. Okay? let me write that down. So for is followed by, and then this clause here. All right. Okay, which is a clause. Okay, how did this happen? I need to extend my. Oh, I see why. Here we go. Okay, which is a clause. So that tells me that it is not a preposition. Because again, remember, prepositions are followed by a noun. And then sometimes an adjective, like, or an article, like the book, or you know, a man, or something like that. But in this case, it's a whole phrase. So actually, then this is functioning as a conjunction, like we talked about before. And actually, the conjunction is for this reason. Okay, so that was a little bit tricky because of that word for. I mean, it is part of, we know from a whiff boot, right, that for is one of the options there. So it's good that you saw that. And then we just need to test it, though, because that word for can sometimes act like a conjunction. So we have to check it to make sure. And the way we check it was to see, okay, well, what follows the word for? What follows it before I get to the next connector word? And we realized, oh, a clause follows it. So it cannot be a preposition by definition. It must be a conjunction in this case. In this case, for this reason is a subordinating conjunction. Okay? So we don't need to go through the other steps here, because we realize, oh, this is a conjunction. Now, we've got another word that you identified. Let me copy this. Yes, you identified the preposition before. All right, and it's before the father here. So what follows that word before? Is it followed by a noun?
Yes.
Yes, it's followed by the father. Okay, it's, again, there's an article here, but it's the father. So yes, it passes this test. Actually, I'm going to put it up here. Yes, the father. Okay, good. So we do have a preposition in this case. Now, the next question we ask is, okay, let's see now, we're going to try to identify what word is this prepositional phrase modifying. And again, remember, when I say prepositional phrase, a prepositional phrase is simply the preposition plus the noun. Okay, which is sometimes called the object of the preposition. Okay, that's called a prepositional phrase. And again, it's a phrase because there's no verb and subject, all right? So the prepositional phrase, what comes before that preposition? In this case, what comes before it, Pastor Noor? Before the word before, right before the word before.
My knees or
knees, yeah. Okay, so what comes before is the word knees. All right, so we need now to ask ourselves, is there some way that before the father could modify knees? Is there some question that it could answer that makes sense? Is it, so basically we're asking, is it describing, since knees is a noun, is it describing the noun in some ways? Is it saying what kind of knees, or which knees, or is it describing some quality of the knees? Are there knees before the father? Does any of that make sense, or could it make sense?
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, nothing makes sense there. So knees, we would say this, knees does not make sense. Or I probably should put it this way. It does not make sense that before the father would modify knees. Okay? So that didn't work. We need to go to the word before knees. Now again, my goes with knees, right? It's describing the knees. So we don't go to the word my, we go to the word bow. Okay, so let's try bow.
Yeah.
Bow. Could before, so we asked the question, could
Bow.
before the father modify bow? In
Yes.
some way that makes sense. Let me pull this up. Okay, and I heard you say yes. In what way could it modify bow and make sense? I bow before the father.
It is the way I appear before the Father.
Okay, the way I appear, or how, maybe how I bow, or I'm sorry, where I bow. Could that make sense? Where do I bow? Before the Father, or yeah, I think that could make sense, right? I bow before, or even how, kind of. I bow. How do I before the Father? But I think where makes sense as a possibility. Okay, you guys see that? Are there any questions? That makes sense. All right, so because that is the next word that comes before the word before, and it makes sense. So we stop there and say, okay, that's likely the word it modifies. So the summary is that before the father modifies bow, telling us where I bow.
Where?
Okay. So that's the process that we go through. All right. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. Now I know this might seem a little tedious, but we keep practicing and practicing, and the more you practice, then the faster you'll be able to do this. All right. Let's go now to verse 15. I think this was Brother Alex. Am I correct?
Aye, sir.
All right. So let's let me put that here. All right. So we're just going to go through the same series of steps that we did for the last verse. So the first preposition you identified, or potential preposition, is the word from. All right. So we begin by, okay, what follows it? Whom? Every family. And we ask ourselves the question, is it followed by a noun?
Family.
Yeah, well, we've got two nouns here actually, right? We have whom and family. So it's not a clause, and they are nouns. All right, so it is followed by a noun. The most immediate noun that follows it is whom. Okay, so that tells us this is a preposition. Now, if it had said, well, we'll leave it at that. From whom? Okay. The next question we need to ask is, all right, what word comes before the preposition? Well, we've got to go back and grab verse 14, don't we? Because that verse contains the word that comes right before. And what word comes before the word from?
Father.
Okay.
Father.
Father. Now we ask, does that make sense? In other words, could or does, from whom, could, from whom, modify father and make sense? I'm seeing a lot of nodding yes. What do you think, Alex?
I think so.
Okay, in what way do you think it could modify it and make sense? When I say the father from whom?
Answers the question who.
Okay, good. Answers the question who, or even more specifically, what source? Okay, that word from indicates source. You know, I received from Pastor Bobby a message, or I received a message from Pastor Bobby. I received a message from Pastor Bobby. Okay, this tells me the source of the message. Where did it come from? Okay, and in the same way, here, before the Father, from whom, that's telling me what comes next is the source of that is the Father. That's what that preposition from tells us, okay? So we could say here in summary, all right, from whom tells us the which Father, or more specifically, the source. All right. Usually the word from tells us the source. All right, let's go to the next word that you identified as a preposition. And it's one of our words from a whiff boot, the word in. Okay, and the same thing, we'll just identify, okay, what follows in before the next connector word. And notice the next connector word is a conjunction here. And so basically, the only thing between the word in and the next connector word is the word heaven. Okay, so that's what follows the preposition. And is that a noun? Is heaven a noun?
It's a noun. It's a
Okay,
noun.
so we do have a preposition here. Now we ask ourselves the next thing, what comes before the preposition?
Also a noun.
Yeah, it's family, okay, which is a noun. So now we ask ourselves the question, could in heaven modify family and make sense? What do you think?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, in what way? How could it make sense?
It tells us location.
Of the family, more specifically, which family?
Yes.
Okay, the family in heaven, that family.
Yes.
All right. Okay, good. So we would say here that in this case, the prepositional phrase in heaven indicates which family. Okay. All right, and then I think we have now just one more preposition that you identified in this sentence, and that is on. Okay. Now what follows on? Now this makes it a little interesting. Is it followed by a noun?
Yes, it's a noun.
Okay, but what about this word derives? Is that a noun or a verb?
Verb.
It's a verb. Okay, so what I see here, again, remember, what we're doing is whatever follows this word on until we get to the next connector word or a punctuation mark. And notice we have these 4 words. Earth derives its name, and then we have a comma. So technically speaking, when I look at this, I say, well, yes, earth is a noun, but there's also a verb here, derives. So is this a clause?
Yeah, yes, it's a clause.
Okay, so let's talk about this a minute. Okay, what follows is earth derives its name. So that looks like a clause, doesn't it? You have the subject, earth, you have the verb, derives, and then you have an object, name. That's what it looks like. But is that actually a correct assessment of those words? Is earth derives its name a subject? A clause? Is earth the subject of the word derives? That's really my question.
No, does not make sense.
Okay, what does this verb derives go to? Does it go, is earth the subject? Or is it something else? In other words, this is my question. What is the subject of the verb derives? Anybody?
We go to the previous verse. We go back to the previous verse.
Go back to the previous verse, verse 14.
No, whom every family.
Here, let me add this back here.
It's just in verse 15.
Yeah.
The same verse also, but
Okay, what's
every family.
Yeah, it's family, isn't it?
Yeah.
See, he's saying from whom every family derives its name.
You're right.
You see that? He's not saying earth derives its name. And this is where context, okay? We're looking at the immediate context here, and we're noticing that actually what we have here is from whom every family derives its name. That's my sentence. And in English, and this also happens in Greek, sometimes the author will wedge his prepositional phrase in between a subject and a verb. Why would he do that? What does that tell us? Remember, we're going back to the, so sometimes an author will wedge or stick a prepositional phrase between a subject, I'm just going to do this, and verb, or between a verb and object. Okay, that happens. That happens in English. It happens in Greek. My question is, why would an author do this?
Just to qualify the subject. Where does it come from?
Yes.
To give us a picture of what the subject is, it where or describing the subject.
Yes, it comes back to this rule of proximity, again, which tells us that normally a prepositional phrase modifies the word that comes right before it. Okay? And in order to show us that, he put this in heaven, he put 2 prepositional phrases here, and on earth. he put those right after that word family. He's telling us which family, or families in this case, every family, right? Every family in heaven and every family on earth. Okay? Now, what if he had worded the sentence this way? What if he had said, instead of, let me copy it down here. Okay, what if he had said, instead of saying it this way, what if he had said, from whom every family derives its name in heaven and on earth? Okay, what if he had switched it around? Because he wants, let's say he wanted to keep this clause together. And then what if he moved the prepositional phrases to after the clause? What would have happened here? Do you see the difference?
It changes the description in heaven and on earth.
Yeah.
It will be the family, its name.
Yeah, now, by rule of proximity, we would think, well, in heaven refers to name, derives its name in heaven and on earth, or it tells us where it derives its name. It would change what the prepositional phrase is modifying. See, so he has to put it after family if he means every family, those are which are in heaven. All right, the position of the prepositional phrase shows us what it's modifying. Okay, so
Paul is very careful.
Yeah, and
Paul is
actually,
very careful in phrasing it.
and it's precise, isn't it? Because again,
Yeah.
if he wants to modify family, he needs to put these phrases after family. If he wanted to modify name or perhaps derives, he would have to put these phrases after those. Okay? So, for example, this is what it would look like for diagramming. You would say, if it was this, if this way, it would be from whom every family in heaven, because it's which family? The families that are in heaven, the families that are on earth. And then we complete the, that's getting confusing. We complete the sentence by, okay, here's the subject, okay? So we're reminded of this. Family here is the subject, and then derives its name is my verb and my object. Okay, so I'll just put in an arrow here or a line to remind us. Okay, that's my clause. Family derives its name, and Paul puts in heaven and on earth right after family because he wants to modify family. He's saying every family that exists in heaven and on earth, all those families derive its name from the Father. Now, if he had moved the prepositional phrases till after this clause, it would look like this, diagrammed. From whom every family derives its name, and then it would be like this. Okay, do you see that? So it'd be speaking which names? Or possibly another option could be where it derives its name. Those would be two other options. If the prepositional phrases were placed after derives its name. Okay, so the position of these prepositional phrases is very important. And this shows why. And so in English, and again, often in Greek, in fact, I can look it up here and see what did he do in Greek. In English and often in Greek, you will see the author place the prepositions very intentionally close to or right next to the word that he's modifying. All right, that's the rule of proximity. Now, that doesn't occur in every case, but that's often the case, and especially when we have something like this, where notice the author split up the sentence. He put these two prepositional phrases in between the subject and the verb. So he clearly is modifying the subject here because he wedges those two phrases in right after family and splits up the sentence. You will see this a lot, all right, in biblical passages. Because that's the way that in English you can identify the word that's modifying. Let me look in the Greek text here and see. Let me see if I can show. Oh, what happened to my? Oh. Had my interlinear open, but okay, in heaven, I'll just do this. I'll just explain it to you. Okay, so let me put the Greek text down here. Since you're all becoming experts in Greek now, right? Yeah. Yep. Okay. So this class is for big boys, all right? So we're going to look at the Greek here. This isn't for little boys. This is for big boys. All right.
We are experts now because of the interlinear.
Yeah, there you go. So here's the word. This is the word from. Maybe I can just type it below. From. And then that next word is whom. And then this word is every or all. Depends on it. Every, each, or all. And then this word patria is actually, the word comes from the word father, but it can also be translated as family. And then notice here is where we see in the Greek, notice the prepositional phrase is put right after family. And this word is upon or on. Let's do upon earth. And then comes
Kai is conjunction. Epi is upon.
and this is derives name, something like that. Oops, ran out of space.
Onomasetai.
Okay, so I just did there. I put in the this is the idea of to name. Might be more is named. That's a better translation, I think. But notice here, guys. You see, we see from the actual Greek, the two prepositional phrases that I've been talking about in the Greek are also wedged in between the subject here, which is family, subject, and the verb is over here. Okay, so the English translation is actually being faithful to the Greek text. And it's doing the same thing that Paul actually did in the Greek. Paul inserted these two prepositional phrases right after the word family because that's what he wanted to identify. He's saying, what kind of family? Which families? The family, every family in earth, every family in heaven. In heaven and every family on earth. Okay? Any questions on this? Does anybody want me to try to explain that again? Or is it clear? Because please ask if it doesn't make sense. This is very, very common. So I want to make sure you understand. Alan, you had a question or a comment?
It's clear. It's clear.
Okay. So the key to this whole thing was, I think it was Alex that said this, or maybe a couple of you, is you notice that earth was not the subject of the verb derives, because that didn't make sense. All right, it was family derives its name. So this is where context is important. You have to read the whole verse or even a couple verses to ask yourself, okay, where is, you remember we did all that exercises on phrases and clauses and identifying the phrase or the clause. And here we had to utilize that because we recognize family is the subject to that verb derives. That was the key. If you didn't see that, then you'd be very confused. All right. And the other thing that helps us make sense is as we get used to these prepositions, notice that that word earth is a noun. And so it makes sense that, okay, earth must go with on and derives must go with family. Derives its name. All right, but that was the key to understand what was going on in this passage. And then everything else fits. Then it makes sense. Yes, okay, in heaven, in preposition, heaven is the noun. On earth, on is the preposition, earth is the noun. They both follow family. Okay? And so they're both modifying family. That conjunction and is connecting them together. So they're two, remember, this conjunction joins two grammatically equal, in this case, the prepositional phrases. So we know that in heaven and on earth are joined together. So they both are going to modify the same thing. They're written right after family. And that makes sense if it's describing which family. So it is modifying family in heaven and also on earth modifies family. Okay. And like I said, you will see this kind of thing happen often in the Greek text and also then in the English translation. All right, so I'm going to leave it here again. Any questions or before we move on? Okay. Does this kind of thing happen in Visayan where, I mean, I don't know how the language works very well, but as far as, are there prepositional phrases, so to speak, in Visayan? Or is it does the language work differently?
The same also, Pastor Tim.
Okay. So do you have the same kind of a situation where...
I think it depends on...
What's that, Alan?
It depends on the speaker, Sigurd. I think it depends on the speaker. If you want to really emphasize something, a thing, or you want to make it really clear, maybe you can rephrase your words as you communicate.
Yeah, exactly. If you
that's
want
what
to
I'm seeing in the Bible.
Before continuing the next, before continuing the sentence.
So I don't know if anyone, what does the translation do for this verse in the Cebuano version? Does anyone have theirs open? Does it do the same kind of thing as far as these prepositional phrases?
In Cebuano, Pastor Tim?
Yeah, in Cebuano.
Okay. We'll see.
And the reason I'm asking is just if you have this, you know, if you were explaining this passage and you were preaching in Cebuano and people are looking at their Cebuano translations, what would they see? Because in English, if I'm preaching in English to English speakers, they would automatically or generally understand this and the position of these prepositional phrases. They would understand, oh, they modify family because they come right after family. But would that be evident in the Cebuano translation?
try to see, Pastor Tim. Give us a minute.
Yeah, no problem.
That's true in the Cebuano version. Cebuano.
Actually, it is being translated in Visaya, not in this kind of arrangement. It is being paraphrased.
Okay, it's paraphrased. So
Yeah.
does the
Let me read, Pastor Tim. In Cebuano, it will read verse 15, right?
Yeah.
Ephesians 3.
Yeah.
Ephesians 3. Okay. Ephesians 3. 15. Okay. Nga gikan kaniya ginganlan ang tagsa kabanay sa langit ug sa yuta. So it's like it was abbreviated in the Cebuano, Pastor Tim.
Okay. So how would it read if you were to translate that in English?
Literally from the Cebuano.
Yeah.
From this from him named every family in heaven and on earth. That's the literal translation, Pastor Tim.
So
from him named every family in heaven and on earth.
So would it be understood by a Cebuano speaker or reader that heaven and earth would be modifying family, that they would be telling you which family or what kind of family? Would that be obvious from that translation then, or from that? In the Cebuano. Okay.
It seems the Cebuano, Pastor Tim, if you translate it literally into the English, the Cebuano is a more simpler sentence.
Yeah. Okay. I was just curious if that you would see that from that translation. So again, the English is simply following our English translation here. The New American Standard is simply following the Greek text here, as I showed you, in terms of word order. And so in the Greek, we do know, based on the position of the prepositions, they are modifying that word family. Okay? And so that's important. I just want to give you guys confidence when you're studying and you see a prepositional phrase and it's splitting up a sentence like this, that it's intentional by the author, because he's wanting to emphasize or wanting to show that that prepositional phrase, in this case, in heaven, is modifying the word that it comes right after.
Yeah.
Okay?
And by context alone, Pastor Tim, no? That's very obvious.
Yeah.
In the context alone.
Yes. And family, because we know that this family is a subject and the verb is derives. And technically, it really is from whom every family is named, would be the most literal translation. But this captures it more or less.
That's how Pastor Tim, that's how the Cebuano goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Family name.
Okay. So that's even more closer to the Greek than the English, sounds like. Except the word order. It's made it a little different. Alan, did you have something you were going to say?
I'm just curious because here in this passage, I think Paul is really highlighting the work of God in Christ in forming the church, the family of God. So does it say somehow that it is God who defines family?
Yeah, and here that word patria is an interesting word. It'd be a good one to do a word study on, because there's a couple of options. One, he's talking about every believer, or he's actually talking about every creature. You know, every either angels or demons, every human being derives its name or finds its source, its existence from God, and that's one option.
I'm thinking of that because of the uh, the nature of the work of salvation.
Yeah.
Seeing that families now are being broken by sin, being devastated by sin.
Yeah,
I think it's included in the work of God.
That's something, right? He talks about in chapter 2, right? How the impact of sin on every person, and that the grace of God, by grace you've been saved, how God in his mercy, he says there, raises us up, gives us life, right? He says, makes us alive, he said in Ephesians 2, verse 5. Pastor Bobby, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just about to also corroborate that if you begin in verse 1 of chapter 3, Paul was talking about the stewardship of the gospel, citing the Gentiles. So the likely context would be all of the families of the earth, in light of the administration of God's gospel to the Apostle Paul.
Yeah, and that's just something obviously we would need to do more study on to figure out, you know, what family is he talking about here. Obviously, he's describing those in heaven and on earth. And which is it? So yeah, we'd be taking a look at the near context, the further context, and
from verse 1, Pastor Tim, it seems to include the Gentile families, the unsaved families. But if you look at it past now, verse 15, onto the strengthening of the spirit in the inner man, it seems to be localizing it now to the church family.
Yeah, so those would be the options you'd have to weigh as you think it through. What I'm wanting us to see is the grammar, what the grammar will allow us. And we know the grammar here is focusing us on in heaven and on earth is connected to family. All right, and what that means, that's going to take more study. But at least grammatically, we know what it's connected to. And that's important, right? That's one of the steps in identifying, interpreting this passage. Okay? All right.
Okay, my turn.
Okay, were you verse 16?
16.
All right, let me get back up here and
verse
copy
16.
it. Let me copy it so that bring it down here. Okay, verse 16. Sorry for the delay. Okay. So,
all right.
We have verse 16. The first one is, you had the word to here, right?
Yeah. Okay. It seems the main sentence is, he would grant you. Okay. Introduced by that that word, that. Okay. Functioning as a possessive pronoun. And then the first preposition is according to. No?
Yeah.
It is a prepositional phrase, Pastor Tim, according to the riches. And then you have of his grace, okay, which is of is followed by a noun. Okay.
Well, let's do the first one here. Hold on. You're getting ahead of us here. So according to, no, that's okay. According to.
Yes.
All right. Let's ask, what's it followed by?
Is a prepositional phrase. It's followed by the next preposition, Pastor Tim. It's supposed to be, that's supposed to be
Now we're on according to. So what follows according to before we get to the next connector word?
Okay. The riches.
Yeah, the riches. And is that a noun?
Yeah.
Riches is a noun. So it is a preposition. We just always want to check that before we keep going. Okay, it is a preposition. What word comes before the preposition? What word comes before according to?
Yes. Another preposition. Another pronoun. Pastor Tim, you.
You. So we ask, is there any, would that make sense that according to the riches could modify you in some way?
Okay. No.
Okay, according to the riches, modify.
No. According
you, yeah.
to the riches modifies.
So we go to the next word, right? Grant.
Uh,
Right? Could according to the riches modify grant?
Yes.
Yeah, in what way?
Grant what?
Okay, that he would grant.
Or yes. Or grant how?
Yeah, I think how.
Grant what or how? Yes.
Yeah, because according to usually tells us how something is done.
According to Pastor Tim can take the place of the word by in a whip boot. A whip boot.
Yeah, it's similar. We could say it's similar to buy. Because it usually tells us how something is done.
Mm-hmm.
Or the means or the manner, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so
and then
in this case, okay, grant makes sense. So we would, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
I'm just trying to summarize it. So according to indicates how he would grant you. Okay. All right, you're wanting to go to the next one?
Yeah.
All right, let's do
then
it.
you have another preposition of his glory. So it is followed by a noun again, okay? A pronoun actually.
Yeah, which modifies the noun, right? His glory.
Modifies, yes, his glory. This is a possessive pronoun modifying, complementing glory.
Okay.
That's the next one, Pastor Tim.
So what comes before the preposition? What comes before the word of?
It's a noun, the riches or the
okay.
wealth.
Okay, so riches. Now we ask, could that make sense? Could of his glory modify riches?
Yeah, it seems to make sense, Pastor Tim.
Okay. Yeah, which riches?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, so we could summarize that, and of his glory indicates which riches. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have the word of, that preposition again, if we remember a with boot, and that one of those O's is the word of, okay? And of almost always, I think it's the most common preposition which almost always modifies the word right before it. I can't think of any examples where it's separated.
Yeah.
So that's usually an easy one. If you see the word of, you know, that one's usually going to always modify. Now,
the next one is Pastor Tim, to,
okay.
But I have a predicament because
yes, you do.
what it follows is not a noun, but a clause, okay, to be strengthened.
Yeah, so you had the
So-
word to here. Yeah, and the
Yes.
words, okay, so we're going to first identify, it's followed by be strengthened,
Mhm.
correct?
Uh-huh.
Now, is that a noun?
No, it is it is a it seems to function like an adverb, Pastor Tim, modifying grant or
Well, be strengthened, let's first
I'm
deal
sorry.
with that. Be strengthened
Uh-huh.
is a verb,
Is a verb. Yes, that's correct.
okay? Remember, it's actually a
So to is
passive.
functioning like a conjunction, Pastor Tim.
So that would be one option. We would say then, so is to functioning like a conjunction here?
Because it doesn't seem to be a preposition in this construction. In its grammatical construction, it doesn't look like it is functioning as a preposition.
Yeah, it is not a preposition here. So we could say that for sure. So to is not a preposition here. When we ask the question, is it functioning like a conjunction? And we would say no. This is a special class
Mhm.
of words known as, does anybody know what this is?
Infinitives.
Yes. Known as infinitives.
It has triple function.
It has what kind of function?
It has triple function.
Spell that for me.
Triple function.
Oh, triple.
Pastor
You
Tim.
said triple?
What is it? Triple function. It can.
The word to, you mean?
The infinitive, sir, has triple function.
Oh yeah, they can function in several different ways. I don't want to cover them all right now. We'll talk about infinitives later. But if you see a preposition followed immediately, if it's the preposition to, this is the only one. Well, this is the most common one where if it's the preposition to, you have the preposition, because it's still a preposition. It's to is still a preposition here, but if you have the preposition to followed by a verb, then it is an infinitive. Okay? Which means an infinitive can function in a number of different ways. I'll save that for another discussion, okay? But all that we need to know here is, okay, I have the word to, which is a preposition, but it's followed by this verb. So therefore, it's not functioning like a preposition here. It's doing something else. Okay? And we'll leave it at that for now. It's functioning like an infinitive. An infinitive usually will modify another verb. And you were correct, but in this case, it can also, infinitives can serve as an object, and that is exactly what has happened here, that he would grant you to be strengthened. What would he grant you? All right.
According to his riches of his glory.
Yeah, that's how he would grant you, but what he would grant you is to be strengthened.
Yeah.
Okay. So technically,
it goes all the way back to grant.
Yeah, it would look like this. That's a subordinating conjunction connecting it to what was happening before. He would grant you, that's the main clause. How would he grant you? According to the riches. Which riches?
Of his glory.
Of his glory. And then you'd have this. He grants you, and it would go here, to be strengthened. Okay, and we would do this. Insert. Okay, because this is answering the question, what he would grant. Okay, but this is getting pretty complicated. For the purposes of our discussion today, I just want you to understand this word to here is not functioning as a preposition in this case because it's not followed by a noun.
Pastor Tim,
Yeah.
the lessons have made us now sensitive, okay, to what they really are. Otherwise, we would just dismiss that as, you know, a preposition, and that's it. But
Yeah, and
now
then
we have become more sensitive now that it could be something else.
Yeah, and it's important to know what it is because that's going to tell you what it's doing. And like I said here, it's not modifying grant. It's actually the subject or the object of grant. You is the immediate object, but it also, he would grant you to be strengthened. It's a combined idea. This is what he would grant. He's not just saying he would grant you. Okay, that would mean he's giving you. You're the grant. Right? If the sentence was just this, if all he was saying was he would grant you, then that would be like saying he is giving you. Right? He's granting you. The word grant has the idea of give. But that's not the complete thought. The complete thought is he would grant you or giving you to be strengthened. It's that whole idea. That's what he's granting. He's not granting you, he's granting you be strengthened. That's the full idea. All right? And so in this case, this to is not functioning as a preposition where it's modifying some other word. It's actually an infinitive, which is completing the thought. Completing the thought, he would grant you to be strengthened. Or we could say it like this. He would grant you strength. That's basically what he's saying. But slightly differently, and the difference is important. But it's, again, he's not saying he would grant strength. He's saying he would grant you strength. And he's not saying he would grant you. He's saying he would grant you strength. Okay, we can't separate those two. They're both the object, so to speak. And in Sir Sid, we would say, because you're our grammar expert, you actually here is functioning as a indirect object. And to be strengthened is the direct object, technically.
The infinitive functioning as noun.
Yeah, it's functioning as a noun here. That's correct. It's like saying, he would give me money. Okay, what is he giving? Remember, the subject is the actor. Okay, the one doing the action. Okay, in this case, the subject of, I'm just focusing on this sentence right here. He would give me money. The subject is what? In this sentence? Who wants to tell me? He would give me money. What's the subject?
He.
He. The verb? That is the action. Okay? Would give. Now, the object. The object is what receives the action. What is receiving the action?
Me.
Directly.
Me.
Not me. Money.
Ah, money.
Money is receiving the action directly, But there's also what's called an indirect object, and that is the word me. Isn't English fun?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it's
yes.
like I could say he hit me the ball. Same idea. Subject, he, verb, hit, and the object, what was hit? Me is not hit, right? Me does not receive the direct action. It is the ball that's receiving the direct. But there's somebody indirectly receiving the action. That's why we call it an indirect object, because it also participates in the action, but it is not the direct object. We could think of it like this: to me. He hit the ball to me. But in English, you could say he hit me the ball. So when I say, or when Paul says he would grant you to be strengthened, again, the subject is he, the verb is grant, the object is to be strengthened. It's a weird spell. The indirect object is you. Okay? Now this matters because his prayer, Paul's prayer, is that he would grant you, but that's not the specific prayer. It's to be strengthened. That's what he's saying. He would grant you to be strengthened. Okay, so that's why we can't miss this. Now, why does he use an infinitive instead of saying he would give you strength? Well, that would be another discussion we don't have time for right now. But there are reasons that the author uses infinitives. And if I look at the Greek text, all right, again, you're my Greek experts, so I'm going to show you the Greek language here, and then we'll get on to the assignment. Let's see, what were we in verse 16?
First, 13. I have 3 more prepositional phrase there.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to end it here to get to the assignment. But let me just show you this real quick here. Okay, so he says here, this is the word that, in order that to you, according to the riches.
Katato,
Let me
plautos, tais, doxis, or doxa,
the riches,
auton, duname,
glory,
that is power,
his to be empowered. Or to be, sorry, to be able. Let's see, duname. That's sorry. That's with. That's with power. Sorry, to be strengthened.
Yeah, auto, duname,
I cannot spell that word.
Kratai.
All right. So sorry about this, guys. I hope I'm not making it more confusing than. Okay.
From the word kratos.
All right. So that to you, according to, that's kata, according to the riches, that's ta plutos, of glory, his glory. And then here's the with power. And then this is the infinitive. And in the Greek, it is an infinitive. All right, the way it's constructed here. To be strengthened. See that word there?
Yeah.
Okay. and then this is the word through, etc. So I just wanted to show you that the word actually is translated as an infinitive in English is an infinitive in Greek. Yeah, krateothenai. The emphasis is on the here. All right, krateothenai. All right, I just wanted to show you that it is an infinitive there. All right, again, and for now, all you need to do is say, okay, in the first step, you'll be able to catch it because you'll say, is the preposition to followed by a noun or something else? In this case, it's followed by something else. It's followed by be strengthened. That's not a noun. Therefore, this to is not a preposition, as I noted here. All right, that's all we need to care about for now. A little later, we'll talk more about infinitives, you know, what those are, what those do. Again, English has lots of these certain kinds of words, but I'm telling you, this isn't something that, this is from the Greek. So there are infinitives in Greek. So we'll need to be aware of those as well. All right. So as Pastor Bobby mentioned, we do have a few more prepositions here. Let me just, we can do these pretty quickly. If we go to with power,
Yeah.
All right.
Very simple. Okay. Noun, preposition followed by a noun.
Yeah.
All three positive are followed by a noun.
Yep. Yeah. So all three are correct. With power, noun.
Through his spirit.
Through his spirit. Spirit is a noun. The inner man. Man is a noun. So they're all three prepositions. Now, the question is, what do they modify? And we'd have to go through the whole process to figure that out. But I want to get to our assignment here. And so what I'll do is in the notes, I'll identify that for you, at least my opinion. So you'll have that in the handout that I send to you a little later this week, all right? But we're going to stop here so that it gives us time to cover the assignment a little bit, unless there are any questions on what we just talked about. Again, it seems like every session, right, we have this whole new thing that's introduced, and it makes the nose bleeding so much worse. But there's a lot of things to consider with English here. And so we need to be aware of them as you're going through and studying these texts, because again, it's the grammar that's really important. And so what you can do, you know, by the way, is you can look up these terms yourself as well, like infinitives. If you want to look in this week and go online and look up the word infinitive in English, what is it? You can get some reading on your own to determine that. Let me turn the corner, unless, are there any final questions on any part of the discussion so far? Okay. Let's do this. As I mentioned to you, let me first show you the plan here. Hopefully you can see it. We discussed this last week, as I mentioned to you. Now things are gonna get a little more serious because now I want you to get those assignments turned in. So this week, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about this first assignment, the background literary context. I'll show you the example that I sent you and just the format that I want you to follow. And then if you have any specific questions about your passage on this assignment, I'd be happy to answer them. We're talking about it today, the 27th, and then the assignment will be due in 4 days. So what is that, Friday or Saturday?
Friday. Oh, wow. Friday.
Is that Friday or Saturday? No, I think that's Saturday.
Saturday?
Yeah. So,
oh, wow.
So work on getting that turned in because next week we're going to cover the second assignment, which is the character setting analysis. We'll talk about it next Monday, Lord willing, and then that'll be due the following Friday or Saturday, whatever day that is. Okay. So let's that's just a reminder for you guys. Let me open up the assignment specifically. And then as well, if you want to redo your assignment or modify it in any way, you are welcome to do that. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Where is it? Oh. Oops, what happened? Oh. Sorry, give me a minute. I failed to. Open up that assignment. Okay, where is it? And what I did is I sent you an example of the assignment and its format. I did it for the Gospel of Luke because you're going to have the Gospel of John later, so I didn't want to give you an example of the assignment you're going to be turning in later. All right, let me. Do this. All right, got it. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? This is see the example there? This is the background literary context. This is the first assignment that is due. You will be doing it for your Old Testament passage. So if you're preaching out of the book of Jonah, you will do it for Jonah. If you're preaching from Ruth, you'll do it for Ruth. You don't have to do it for both, just your passage, the book which contains your passage, all right? Now, way back, a long time ago, we talked about this back in March, if you can remember that far back. So if you need to review, go back to session 1 of the workshop, and then the video link is here that I gave you, and you can review that assignment and the details there. I'm going to give you the format here as well in this example. And again, remember, this assignment covers the whole book overall. So even if you're preaching from Jonah chapter 3, you're doing this for the whole book of Jonah. Okay? Not just chapter 3. So just keep that in mind. And then the steps for this analysis is these 3 steps. All right, first, you're going to identify the background context. All right, and that involves each of these elements. You're going to identify, if you can, or as best you can, the author, the writer. All right, now for Jonah and for Ruth, the writer doesn't tell his name explicitly, so you might just have to identify some possibilities, but also, too, note anything about the writer that you see in the book. You know, what his tone is, or anything like that. Also, you're going to identify the biblical audience. Who do you think was the original audience? Now, you have to be careful. For example, in Jonah, the book is written about the Ninevites. That doesn't mean it's written to the Ninevites. Okay? And I think it's written to someone else, but it's a story about the Ninevites or the Assyrians. Okay? And also, you want to mention any key locations. Now, this again is in the whole book, not just your passage. So if you're preaching from Jonah chapter 1, don't just mention the locations in Jonah 1, but are there any other locations in the book? And then just give a brief summary of where those locations are and what do we know about them. So, for example, in the book of Jonah, what's going to be one key location there that you better not miss? The book of Jonah. Anybody know? What's one? Nineveh. Yeah. Better know something about Nineveh. That's central to the book. So what do we know about Nineveh? Now, there's some things mentioned in the book of Jonah about Nineveh. Verse 1 and later in chapter 4, he mentions some things about Nineveh And then also look, you can use a cross-reference. Look for some other passages that maybe describe the Ninevites. And the Ninevites, remember, that's the capital of Assyria. So it's the Assyrians. All right. The date of composition. Now, obviously, the books don't say this book was written in, BC 690. We're not given that, but sometimes we can identify when the events of the book took place, and you can for Jonah, but you'll have to look at another passage outside of Jonah. And then sometimes we can kind of guess the potential time frame when it was written, but not always. Okay. Now, cultural context. What does that mean? Well, again, that means who are the people involved in this story? What do we know about them? So, for example, the Ninevites. What were the Ninevites known for? Were they a peaceful people? Were they a violent people? Were they an occupier nation, or were they a subservient nation? Were they similar to the Jews or different to the Jews? Those kinds of things. What were some of the cultural practices? Okay. And then finally, you want to try to identify the occasion, meaning why did the author write this story? From what you know of it so far, what do you think was his purpose in writing? Okay, just try to identify that. So that's the first step, the background context. And I'll go through that again in a minute. Second step is the literary context, and that is identifying each different section of the book and kind of summarizing. So in Jonah's case, you have essentially four sections divided up by the chapters. It's the same for Ruth as well. Ruth is divided up by chapter, and essentially each chapter is one of these sub-stories within the book. Okay, so what you're going to do, and is you're going to summarize each of those stories just in a overview statement. All right. So Jonah 1, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're going to essentially in Jonah have four summary of each story, because those are the four. You can think of Jonah and Ruth actually as these smaller stories within the bigger story. Okay, Jonah 1 happens at a particular location. Jonah chapter 2 happens at another location. Jonah 3 at another, and then Jonah 4 at another. And all of them together make up the whole story, but you want to summarize each of those four. They're kind of like the subplots within the story. And then finally, the author's purpose of writing. You generally cover that in the background context, but I want you to state it explicitly. So let me show you what this looks like from the book of Luke. All right. And then if you have any questions, you can ask. Again, let me highlight too, by the way, try to just do all the work on your own initially. All right. What can you come up with on your own? Don't go to outside resources at this point. Okay. All right. So step 1, the background context. You're going to identify the biblical author. As I mentioned, you're going to identify as much as you can about him. Now in Luke, there's a lot of information. So that's why you notice I got a lot of stuff here. You won't have that much stuff for Jonah or Ruth. All right. So don't feel like every background context is going to have all this information about the author. The Gospel of Luke's a big gospel, and we also had the book of Acts. So those combined, there's a lot of information about the author involved in that. So John, there'll be a little bit of information too when you get to that about the author. Biblical audience, Luke actually gives it directly. So sometimes the authors will do that. John gives his directly in John chapter 20 when he says these were written so that you might believe. He's writing it primarily to people in general so that they would come to believe Jesus is the Christ. So anything about the audience that you might be able to summarize. So in the case of Jonah or Ruth, thinking about the audience, we have to think about, in the case of Jonah, Jonah was a prophet, and a prophet was primarily responsible to preach to people of Israel or Judah, right? So that would be the most likely audience for that particular book. Again, I mentioned already key locations. Identify those. The dates of composition. Cultural context, we already talked about those, okay? Now, the second step is the literary context. Again, that is the author's flow of thought. And for a large book like the Gospel of Luke, or when you get to the Gospel of John, you can just sort of summarize more like an outline because it's just so big. But like I said, for example, in the book of Jonah, you're going to have Jonah, you're going to summarize Jonah 1, Jonah 2, Jonah 3, Jonah 4. Those make up 4 particular stories. So summarize just what happened in Jonah 1, Jonah, etc. All right. And then chapter 2, 3, and 4. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I want you to think about how, this is important, how these stories connect within the larger story. This is key, guys. Okay? So if you're preaching Jonah chapter 1, you need to be asking yourself, how does this fit in the book of Jonah? How does it connect to the theme of the book of Jonah? Why did he put this story here in Jonah? Why did he put it, like for example, if it's Jonah 1, why did he begin the story here? If it's Jonah chapter 2, how does that fit with Jonah 1? How does it fit with Jonah chapter 3? All right? So that's the idea. Don't, my point is, don't isolate your passage from the book overall. That's what I'm getting at. As Pastor Bobby likes to remind us often, right? The context. So it's the context of the whole book. Each story is not an independent, disconnected story. They're all connected together in some way. Okay, there's a flow of thought that the author's communicating. So in the literary context, I want you to summarize each of those main sub-stories, if you will. And I believe they're divided this way, as I do for Ruth. I believe Ruth is also divided by chapter. All right, now for Luke, because it's so big, I just had this sort of outline. And John will be the same way. But I don't want you to do that for Jonah or Ruth, because they're smaller books. And all right, and make sure you include in that, how does the passage, your passage, so again, if you're preaching Jonah chapter 3, how does that fit within, between 2 and 4? Jonah chapter 2 and Jonah chapter 4. All right, and then I just gave an example from Luke 4 in this case. And then last but not least, as I already said, the third thing is you want to identify the author's purpose for writing. Why did he write this book? All right. And I'll give you a hint. In Jonah and Ruth, it has a lot to do with the last couple of verses of the book. Okay? So that's what you're going to do this first assignment. You're going to do identify the background context, the data identify the literary context, and then summarize the author's purpose. Okay? Now, again, I ask, do your own work initially. If you do, afterwards, use a resource. I don't really want you to do that, but if you do, then make sure you give credit specifically to what you used. Okay? Now, as I said, if you want to redo your assignment or update it a little bit, I'd be happy to take a look at that as well. Now, any questions about the format here or about your specific passage, your assigned passage for this assignment? Does it make sense, I hope?
Pastor Tim,
Yes.
I would like to apologize. I want to do it in private, but
Okay.
nonetheless, I'd rather do it here at the hearing of everybody. I would like to apologize to you because I haven't responded to you since February of this year when you were trying to encourage me with assignment. Honestly speaking, it is embarrassing to admit that since that time, I just opened Canvas today and saw your message to me encouraging me for the assignment last February. So I responded already now,
Okay.
Pastor. It's embarrassing, but I'm sorry. I apologize. Next,
Well, thank
Pastor
you.
Tim, I cannot seem to find my book assignment.
Okay.
No, I'm a little confused if I was assigned to Ruth or assigned to Jonah.
Well, you should be able to see on Canvas
Yeah,
under the syllabus.
the syllabus. Yeah, okay.
If you go to the
So
syllabus.
I will look for it under syllabus.
Yeah, under syllabus.
Okay. There it is. Okay, here it is. I found it now. Pastor Tim.
Okay.
All right. I was looking for it while we were having class. Now I found it, Pastor Tim. Thank you. Found it now.
Okay, great. Why can't I? Oh, there we are. I was going to log in here as well. Oh, maybe.
So you have Gospel of John and then... So mine is root 4. Okay. So that means, Pastor Tim, I won't be doing the Jonah anymore because I was assigned to root, or I will still do Jonah also.
Well, yeah, I think I'm just looking at Canvas right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had assigned you Ruth 4. So I think, oh man, sorry, my computer's running slow here. Yeah, so you're, yeah. So let's see. Why were you studying Jonah?
No, not really.
Okay.
Pastor Tim, but if I'm required to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah, do Ruth 4, and it'll be the same. What I said about Jonah applies to Ruth as well. As far as the literary context, I think it's divided up by 4 chapters. So you have to ask yourself.
I'm sorry, Pastor Tim. So I won't need to do Jonah, but Ruth.
No, just Ruth.
Just Ruth.
Yeah, but like as Pastor Allen mentioned, his assignment's Jonah 3, so he would be doing the book of Jonah. All right.
Yes, I understand. How about this, Pastor Tim? We were assigned, there are 2 passages here for each one of us.
Correct.
For example, for me, it's Jonah 3 and John chapter 5, verses 1 to 18.
Yes.
Should I do the Gospel of John also?
No, just do Jonah right now. And we're going to do all 6 assignments for Jonah.
Got it.
And then you'll preach your passage. Then we'll go to John. Okay.
So we'll tackle first, Pastor Tim, the Old Testament passage.
Yes.
We were assigned to.
Yeah, we'll go through.
Old Testament. passage and book, the Old Testament book and passage we were assigned to.
Yes, that is correct. So looking back to the plan here, notice I have here background, literary context, Old Testament passage. Okay, all of these will just be your Old Testament passage. Then, once you do the sermon, then we'll turn around and actually beginning next year in January, Lord willing, you'll do the same for your New Testament passage.
All right.
So there's time here, right? I've given you several weeks. So if you just stick with getting each of these done each week, you'll be in good shape, okay? And we'll talk about the preaching part of it when we get a little closer. In a couple of weeks, I'll discuss that, how to get the sermon evaluated and things like that. But for now, just your focus. Pastor Bobby's going to be Jonah. Pastor Allen's going to be, Pastor Bobby will be Ruth.
Yeah.
Pastor Allen will be Jonah. And the rest of you, again, you can find your passage on there. But the focus is going to be getting these assignments for your Old Testament passage done first. And then we'll turn around and do the New Testament passage after the Old Testament one is done. All right? And then my commitment is to make sure, for example, once these are turned in, then I will make sure to be up to date on the grading for those assignments that are due. Okay, so you can get that feedback. Now, some of you I know have done these assignments a long time ago, so it may be a good idea to sort of go back, look at your assignment after we've done the workshop together, and even after we discussed the format this morning. And you might want to go back and see if there's any changes or additions you'd like to make on that assignment. Again, not necessarily because I'm telling you to do that, but I think it would help in preparing you to preach the sermon. Refresh your mind on that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any questions? Any specific questions any of you have about your particular passage for this assignment?
Okay.
All right. It sounds like we're ready to go. So here we go, guys. Let's get these done and move our way towards module 3.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. We will be back to the drawing board, Pastor Chen. Back to the drawing board.
So next week we'll follow the same format here. We'll cover some of the notes as far as the workshop and we'll get back on prepositions a little bit and hopefully maybe get to the next step there. And then we'll take the last 30 or 40 minutes and focus on the assignment for next week, which will be the character and setting analysis. Okay. So thank you for patience. I know some of this is, again, just very slow process, it might seem, and there's all these different rules but the more we do together, I think the more you'll be able to, the more comfortable you will be in the long run. And so we just keep doing the examples together and keep working through these passages so that you can take care of that. And then Alex, I just saw your note, so I'll resend you an invitation to Canvas. Is that what you were asking? Okay. Yeah, I'll do that right now. Yes, Pastor Bobby.
We ought to be the ones to thank you for your patience to us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure to do that, and I hope these are continue to be helpful to you. And again, I understand it's not an easy process, but it'd be a lot different if we were born back in back in Paul's day or something, and we speak the language, and we wouldn't have a lot of these same issues we'd have to figure out. But because we weren't born then, and we don't speak Koine Greek, and we have to sort of learn all of this as we go.
Pastor
Yes.
Tim, for example, I'll speak on my own. Right now, I am doing preaching online. I could just imagine if I was ignorant of all of this, I'd be making a fool of myself with all of those sermons already in YouTube and in Facebook. Can you imagine how many probably would be ridiculing or criticizing my sermons if I am not aware of these things?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
imagine.
And that's the thing. There's a lot of accountability now, right? If you have it recorded online, now it's like the whole world can access it.
Pastor Tim and Pastor DeBrudge now can critique.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, men. I see that it's 12 o'clock now. Let me ask our brother Anselmo if he would close us in prayer. Ask the Lord to bless the rest of our week.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me, sir? My
Yes,
internet
sir.
connection is quite poor.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, let us pray. Our great and loving Father, once again, thank you for this privilege that we can study your word. Thank you, Lord God, that we studied the preposition and all